All right. Actually, I'm subbing here today, if you will, for Kendrick Norris, who was going to be the active minister on site. And he called Jim a couple of days ago and said he couldn't make it. I made the bad mistake several days ago of sharing with Jim that from about the age of 4 to 16, I wanted to be a minister. And I was a little lamenting about changing my degree or to law school. And he said, well, I got a surprise for you, Pete, because on Sunday you're going to be a minister. So anyway, I'm here to honor Bob Metz. We gather now at Camp Hawthorne, for many of us, a special place that unfolded, formed, offered us a rare community of strong values and varied experiences. This is a sacred ground that holds many, many precious memories. We gather in the protective shelter of God's healing love to remember those campers who have, and staff who have passed on, and especially to celebrate the dynamic life of Bob Metz. And if we could, in our own way, let us pray. Gracious God, we come to the cove seeking the support of your love and the support of each other's presence in the face of the mystery of death. Help us now to know your care for all persons, in time and beyond time. Remind us that there is a reality beyond present sight and understanding. May we understand now, as we never have before, that those who die pass from us, but not from your love. Metz is not given to death, but to you. And so we look forward to the time when heart shall welcome heart again, and all eternity will be a fellowship with you. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And now I would like to read two of Metz's psalms and positions from the Bible. The first is Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The next is Ecclesiastes 3, again, one of Bob's favorite things from the Bible. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. I have seen the business that God has given to everyone to be busy with. God has made everything beautiful in its time, and God has put eternity in our minds. And now, having read those things and being proud, I'm going to give the Peter and Ricky Metz time to come up, and then anyone else who would like to come forward to remember a camper. I know anyone who feels like that is fine, but I'll start with Ricky Metz.
Ricky, Richard, Rich, Dicky.
Call him Dicky.
All right.
Yeah, first off, thanks for everyone showing up today, and thanks to Jim and Peter Slavinsky for arranging this, including the tribute to Dad here today. It's really sweet. Appreciate it. And to you, Pete, for reading that, and to Ken for really writing some very nice things. I'm just going to say a few things about Dad, and then maybe connect it a little bit with his beginning with summer camp in general. I always thought it was kind of an interesting history, but at any rate, first off, Dad always was my hero. Throughout my entire life, I was just always felt so blessed, so honored to be his son. He just seemed to do so many things so well, and it always amazed me. And just had this wonderful, warm demeanor about him. So it was something I mentioned to him frequently, in person, in Father's Day cards, and whenever I could, birthdays, and just thanked him for being such a wonderful dad and my hero. And he'd always just give me a little smile and chuckle. But there were many things I loved about my father, but mostly it was the way he lived life. Anyone who knew him could attest. Bob Metz lived life to the fullest, and he proved that day after day. He had this incredibly uplifting spirit. He laughed easily and often, and I would have to say, in my mind, his biggest trademarks was his big smile and infectious laughter. I still hear it in my ears. There's a saying, I'm not sure who I can attribute this to, but the measure of a man is in the lives he's touched. And no doubt, Bob Metz touched a lot of people's lives, and profoundly. At a memorial service held earlier this summer, a former minister of his got up and said, "In my 35 years of ministry, I've never met someone quite like Bob. His exuberance for life was amazing. Some people see their cup half empty, some half full. Bob's cup was always overflowing." And I thought that summed up rather nicely the bright disposition and outlook my dad had on life. To the camping side. Dad first got his start introduced to summer camp through New York University. NYU was known for a great summer camp program, and that's where he got to hone his teaching skills, taught a lot of classes there. Really kind of fell in love with the whole concept of camp and what it offered individuals, young and old for that matter. So that was his start, and at about that same time, shortly after, he worked at a camp in New Jersey. It was a summer day camp, and the camp was for children with Down syndrome. And I remember Dad telling me a number of stories. He loved working with those kids. He said they were always smiling, had such big hearts, and just couldn't get enough and to learn activities and things. And of course, at that point, he was doing a lot, swimming, teaching, and all those things. He did tell a story that I know impacted him. He said one day, for whatever reason, a young child wandered into the lake and got a little too deep, lost his footing, and started drowning. No one was around except for another young boy, slightly older, who took it upon himself to wade into the lake, grab this little boy's arm, and drag him to the beach and save his life. And my dad said shortly after that, he and a few others were on the beach, and the mother of the boy who did the saving was there. And she said, if for no other reason God put, choking up, for no other reason God put my son on this earth but to save that other little boy, it was so worth it. So I remember Dad saying, yeah, they basically all got pretty emotional at that point. But that was just one of many stories he had. his first experience with camp in Maine was Camp Mashegon. Mashegon was located on Crescent Lake where Camp Neshoba is right now. Had a very interesting experience there. Camp was cut short. It was a major problem. And even though he was one of the young members on staff, he had to step up and take charge of the situation. And I could tell you about that story later tonight around the campfire and a glass of wine or two. But the season was cut short, and he did what he needed to do. It was the very next year that Lex Sheldon reached out to Dad, and that was the beginning of his tenure with Camp Hawthorne, where he did a variety of things, counselor, waterfront director, head counselor, and then years later, as you know, he and Jack McCleary became co-founder directors of Hawthorne and ran that for, Jim, I'm looking to you for this. I want to say it was either 10 or 12 years, but I can't honestly remember.
Yeah, probably 10 or 11.
Okay, there we go. His love for Maine, and in particular Hawthorne, was immense. He absolutely adored being here. And I know really, Hawthorne began his love affair with Maine, and it was easy to see why my mom and dad moved up here and retired years later. And I know he always enjoyed coming back here and helping out when he could, helping out open with some of the newer owners, and I was glad he did. You know, it was just kind of, I don't know, kept him in the loop, and he got to see a lot of campers and counselors that came back to visit. So it was always heartwarming to hear who we ran into. It was a lot of fun to hear that. One story I can tell you, Dad was an avid swimmer. I think you all knew that. He swam every single morning before breakfast. It didn't matter what the weather, how cold the lake was. And he would do that even when he retired up here. He did that right through September. You know, sometimes the first week in October, neighbors would tell me, Bob's out there swimming in the morning. Because my mother was always worried, so she'd be perched on the deck watching him swim, you know, up and down the coastline. But he told me this one story. He was up here in, I have to say it was the end of May, beginning of June. He was opening up camp, and he was doing his morning swim on the eastern shore over here like he did. There was this big rock out there, if you guys remember, the ladies' dock, and then a huge rock about a half mile away he'd swim to, and then he'd swim back. He said, well, he was swimming one morning, and he took a breath, and when he looked up, a moose was bearing down on him. I said, Dad, that is unbelievably scary. What the heck did you do? He goes, I swam a little faster. So he had 100 stories like that. Golfing, skiing, and all that stuff too. But I have to say, as I said, he was my hero, but he was also a pretty cool dad. I mean, how many fathers do you know on their 50th birthday crack open a can of Budweiser and drink it while skiing slalom around Panther Lake? So yeah, that was a highlight. I'll just end by saying this. Bob Metz had a zest for life, a unique ability to find joy in each day, and to share that joy with anyone who came into his life. Thank you.
Amen.
So I just wanted to share a few stories about Dad and my memories of Dad and camp, and hopefully you guys will come up and say a story if you want to afterwards. But yeah, I have so many great memories of Dad and camp, and we had a service over at King's Grant like a month and a half ago, and you know, we talked about a lot of things at that service, but we didn't talk about was Camp Hawthorne. I think Jack went over to you and said, something like, I can't believe you guys didn't talk about Camp Hawthorne. It's like, well, we're going to be here in a month. We'll talk about Camp Hawthorne here. So it's too bad Jack couldn't make it because he's great at speaking and he tells some great stories. So, but when I think about camp, I think about starting in winter, right? Because Dad had the wrestling team, he had the practices, he had his teaching, he had his whole career, but he also had camp. And camp starts in the wintertime to have a successful season, right? You've got to start your recruiting, you got to start doing the meetings with the parents, and he had that slide projector, he had that screen and all that stuff, and he'd go out to the houses, and if you're going to have a successful camp, it starts then. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about are kind of life lessons and maybe even business lessons and maybe even some good direction and how to do the right thing. I don't have the integrity that Dad did. I wish I did. But I'm still working on it. We'll see. So, then camp started. Dad was gone. Dad was gone in May. We're still in school. We would be in school until the second week of June. And then Mom would take us up, and, Mom was doing everything. And then she'd come up here, and she'd start cooking, right? She did all that work. But one of the things I remember is that Dad always had a pen and a clipboard, right? And it was before camp. And you had the breakfast, and then afterwards he had his clipboard out, and you had what you were going to do for the morning, right? And it was always, Pete, you're weeding at the tennis court. You're weeding at the tennis. And I always hoped for something else, So I'd have lunch, and it's like, okay, what's it going to be now? Maybe I'll get to finally paint, Pete, tennis courts. But then as you get a little older, and maybe the weeds were gone, I remember that it would be painting, a lot of painting, and we had that maintenance shed behind the kitchen, remember back there. And, what I liked about how Dad would do something, he would show you how to do it, right? He'd be there, teach you how to do it, make sure you understood it, and make sure you understood how to clean up. The paintbrushes go in the turpentine when you're done, you clean it up, and off you went. And he'd check on you, but once you got it, and you did your thing. And he did that with everybody. And, he had his whole plan, and there was a lot of work before camp, but he also made it fun. And you were just working hard, but you enjoyed it. And I know, it's just all good memories, and I think good lessons about making sure you have your plan, you're executing it right, you're communicating well. And, he was a great teacher. And, just to digress a second, like you said, I had so many people from Fairleigh Dickinson, the golf team, the wrestling team, you got the best dad. And, it's like, yeah, and we're so lucky and so blessed to have Dad as our dad. It was sometimes when you're younger, maybe you don't want to share him as much. You get a little jealous, right? My favorite church and my favorite religion was Camp Chapel, right? And we walked through there today, and it's just, you can still tell where the altar was and everything. But I remember going there, and we sang, I think sometimes we would sing Cat Stevens songs, but it was great, right? And the first service of every year, Dad would tell the parable of the talents. Remember that? And he told it his own way. But the lesson, and for me to learn it, it was good because I'm pretty thick, so I know I heard it a lot of times, so I finally got through. But the whole story about the two servants, but I always thought it was brothers, that took their talents and made more of it, and then the one that didn't. And I always equated it to the one that didn't was the kid reading a comic book in bed, right, in the cot on a sunny day, and the other ones where they're out there trying new things, pushing yourself to do things that may be uncomfortable. Maybe it's asking a girl to dance at a dance, or maybe it's sailing and being nervous about flipping over. But I thought it was a great way that he started the camp season every year. So that was a great memory. And I don't know if he started it or who started it, but I remember the cabin representatives. Remember, you depending on the counselor, they might pick one or rotate it or elect it. But you had a cabin representative meeting, and Dad would get all the, one kid from each cabin in a circle, and he'd get them a soda, and you're having a meeting with, the owner of the camp. And I thought it was a great thing that he did because he was getting feedback right away from the customers on how are things going, right? But he was also doing something we call skip level today, right? It's like, oh, you got to do a skip level if you're a manager and talk to the people. So he was also getting feedback on the staff. You know, how are they doing, right? And I think he was also teaching the kids to be leaders. And, you know, how many kids are having a meeting with, you know, camp owner when they're 10 years old, talking about issues and how can they get resolved, you know? So I thought it was wonderful. But I do remember one time this kid, he was in cabin 1, and I was always happy if I could go there and spend time with Dad. But the kid's like, yeah, we were talking about it. We'd like to get the lake heated. And that's exactly what happened. You know, but Dad didn't laugh. He might have smiled, but he's like, you know, I understand. You know, it's cold. You know, I'm confident it's going to get a little warmer in a couple of weeks. You'll be great. You know, but I just thought those were great. And then the last story that I was going to tell was I remember playing Twilight Leagues with him, and you know, I was the world's worst baseball player forever. I'm still blind as a bat, but that wasn't my thing. But you know, I did like to win, and we were very competitive. Everything we did, you know, we would play cutthroat with Dad, which is racquetball, you know, 1 against 2. And I mean, we would play to the death. I remember one time I drilled him in the back. And he's like, Jesus! You know, all right. He served it again in the same spot. I did the exact same thing. Yeah. I was kind of chuckling on that. But we were playing Twilight Leagues, and I was probably like in cabin 3-ish age, and there was a kid that was batting, and we were about to win a game. And when you played on Dad's team, you didn't win a lot of games because that's not the way he was approaching it. But you remember he had that glove that had only 3 fingers, that old glove. He always used it. And he always pitched. And he was pitching this kid, and I kind of walked in, you know, like a little huddle at the mound, and I'm like, hey, Dad, can I strike this guy out? I'm going to win. He's like, it's not about that. You know, and it's like light bulb, right? It's like, oh, yeah, okay. So there's times when we're competitive, and there are times when we're not trying to beat up the little guys. Okay. but it was a good lesson for me, and it still sticks to me today because we do like to win. Lee and I, you know, we battle. Whatever we're doing, we're trying to win. So but he's just such a great guy, a great teacher, and you know, I just love hearing your guys' stories about him because it's great that we could share them. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. Is there anyone else who would like to share a memory about Bob Metz and or another camper who's no longer with us?
I'll say a word for Bob.
Okay.
I came here when I was 8 years old and met Pete for the first time in cabin 2. And we've been best friends since that day. So we've known each other for 50 years. And we've lived together for a long, not together, but in the same town for a long time. And you know, we see each other a lot. And so, you know, at camp, Bob was always doing what he was doing, and everyone said such nice things about him, and it was all true. But you know, the thing that stuck to me early was, and is also something that I think about, that I always have to continue to work on, is how he would, if there was an issue that needed to be done, he was just doing it. Like there was no hesitation. If it was an issue, it was getting addressed. But joyfully and happily, and you know, and he was just loving life the whole time. And we've grown to know, and our families have gotten to know each other very well since that time. And we've spent, you know, I don't know, all of our summers almost up here, and visiting the Metzes. And before that in Paramus, and you know, Bob and Glow were just super special to me. They were such awesome people. And I've learned so much from him about life and the way to attack problems and try to be joyful all the time, because that's what he was. He you know, the laugh, Dickie, that you were talking about, you know, you can never forget it. And the friends that he had also. I mean, you know, sitting up here at his cottage, or, after camp with the Parazones and the times that we had with them and the Taylors, the people that he surrounded himself with were also just like, they gravitate toward him, that type of people, and then you're like, wow, these people are just so great. So, I always considered him like a second father to me. I didn't have much of a father figure when I was growing up, and he filled in, and he taught me so much about life. And I just, I just want you to know, and I think you do, how I feel about him and how special he is to me, and your mother too. I mean, I miss Glo a lot, and so just, I miss him, and he was a great guy. And he's with me always, like he's part of me.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to share anything? Yes, sir.
I can't help but, so this is just one, but McDuff was a dog throughout my childhood. So, beautiful, and he chased water skiers. I mean, not just chased water skiers, he swam. McDuff swam. And you'd have to watch out when you're skiing for this little head in the middle of Panther Pond. And Bob, and I have to say, when we grow up, we'll associate a smell. Bob would smoke Captain Black. And to this day, in a pipe, it can bring a tear to your eye because you remember. It's weird how your nose can bring you back through years, and a smell, and there's nothing sweeter than that smell going as I would walk to the cove if Bob had been in front of me with the Captain Black pipe. To this day, it's amazing. But so one day there's ropes going out on the beach and setting up. What's going on, Bob? McDuff is going water skiing. So before McDuff died, Bob, which is what Bob does, he had a plan and made sure that McDuff had the opportunity to finally water ski. So beautiful dog that is kind of like my summer pet, right? McDuff was the one that we all loved. So that's just a sign of Bob. He wanted to make sure McDuff finally got to walk on water.
Buried with Cream Puff off the camp road.
Oh, wow. That's cool. All wonderful stories. I remember that I was a short camper and fairly new. He always would look at me and say, "Hey, Pete, make yourself useful. Just don't stand there." And, which was a kind way of saying, come on, we're putting the canoe in the water, or come on. And the other thing that really impressed me about your dad was occasionally we'd have a camper who was sick, and one time I got something that was taking 6 days to heal. And he would come up every day and see me. And he'd say, "Pete, how you doing? And you're behaving, you're doing what you're told to do." And so he would always say, "You'll get well, don't worry, we'll see you back at the fort soon." And but every day he would visit me. So that was wonderful. A lot of wonderful memories, and thank you. Is there anybody else? Yes, Tom.
Yes, some of you may know Metz and my father began their educational careers together at Poly Prep, and remained lifelong friends. In fact, the last picture I have of Metz is with my dad on Crescent Lake, and what were they doing? They were about to go for a swim. Okay, and I guess Metz must have been in his late 70s, and my dad was in his 80s. And Dickie and I were talking about this a little bit. For all of their lives, we would have annual trips back and forth. They would come into Brooklyn, and we'd go out to New Jersey. And my memory of the two of them, and in certain ways they were emotional twins, and the rest of the families would kind of disperse. Peg and Glo would make food, and Metz and my dad would go into kind of a living room, and we lived in a very cramped apartment, so to speak, in a two-family house. And what I remember, and I picked up intuitively, was that what they planned to do was not to drink a lot of beer, not to reminisce, but they would store up human situations in their various schools that were perplexing them. So Metz was waiting for my father's counsel about the most perplexing human situation at his venue. And my father was storing up his most perplexing human situation, whatever it was, whether it was a fellow teacher, educator, whether it was a student, and they would solve it together and seek one another's counsel. And it kind of rubbed off, and I think it's no mistake that, I began my career doing exactly what my father did, and it's no mistake that Sammy began his career doing exactly what my father and Metzi did, and informed our career, I think, with that same kind of emotional connection, or first priority being the human beings involved. And so I learned it from my dad, but I also certainly learned it from Metzi.
Thanks so much, Tom. Is there anyone else? Yes.
Hi, I'm Chris Murphy, and everybody's talking about all the great memories of Metzi. Anybody who was a counselor here, they were officer of the day, and you never knew the night before if you're going to be officer of the day the next day, and you maybe out a little too late at night, and you're there hoping you're not, and then you hear, "Perf." There's a guy with a clipboard there saying,
Yeah, remember the point. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Tom Watkins. So I grew up without a dad. My dad died when I was 3 years old. So coming to camp was my chance to see role models. Your dad was just a god to me. And the one year I was a dishwasher, the other dishwashers decided it would be really fun to start throwing vegetables in the exhaust fan. And I wanted no part of it. It's like, nope, not doing it. But your dad found the screen all ripped out and vegetables all on the roof. And he came into our dishwasher cabin and read us the riot act. And I'm standing there going, holy shit. Metz is yelling at me. And I had to track him down. A couple hours later, I'm searching camp for your dad, like just frantic. And I went up to him and I said, Mr. Metz, I swear to God, it wasn't me. And I said, I love this place. I have too much respect for this place and you. And he looked at me and he says, yep, I knew that already. Oh my God. It was just what he thought of me as a man, and just a shout out to every counselor that I've ever had here. You have all been a part of my life as a kid without a father, and I just want to thank every single one of you for the man that I've become because of you, because of Jack, because of your dad, and so thank you.
Thank you. Are there others? Yes. Bruce, sorry.
like our mother.
Yeah. Bruce, sorry.
I love Bob Metz, but he did something for me after camp. I went to graduate school and got a job as a very young fellow teaching in a Waldorf school in a troubled class, and the parents demanded a meeting with the headmaster to talk about this new teacher that they were bringing in who was so young. I was 24 years old at the time, and there was a lot of talking. It was all in front of me about how I would be fit for this or not fit for it, and why they didn't get an experienced teacher, they got me, and everything else. And the headmaster of the school said, let me just read you a recommendation we got for this young man. And this was a glowing recommendation about this wonderful young man who did these great things and showed leadership and was really good, was really hard work. And I'm thinking, who's this guy? I mean, and who wrote this? And at the end, he said it was Bob Metz, director of Camp Hawthorne. Wow. And it was in Garden City, so there was still some Camp Hawthorne knowledge there. And it carried the day.
It's great.
Yes, sir.
So the first time I ever saw Bob Metz, I was a camper for Camp Agawam, 1969. We came over to play baseball and get trounced by Camp Hawthorne. But along the sidelines, we saw hey, and how was that yesterday in the dining hall? There's all this talk about Hawthorne sailing, and I'm thinking, from Agawam, Hawthorne was really strong at baseball and swimming.
Right.
And we weren't as well known for sailing. But so I came over for a baseball game, and Linus Cook struck me out twice.
Wow.
And but I saw Bob Metz, and we had a great camp director also, Dave Mason, over at Agawam, and they were kind of bookends in the league, famous camp directors. And but then I stayed at Agawam and didn't see much of Bob Metz the next several years. I was a counselor, and but he definitely had made an impression on me, just knowing that he was a great friend of Dave Mason's. So when we took over Camp Hawthorne in 2010, I heard, I don't know exactly when Bob Metz moved into the area. Did he move to Raymond?
He lived in Raymond on Crescent.
So he lived in Raymond. And what year did he move up here?
80.
Oh, so he was here a long time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was learning the history from Jim Brennan and the early days with Major Bigelow and the Sheldons, and then it was such a treat to think Bob Metz was right around in town, and I think it was very fitting that the first place I met him, we went to church at the Raymond Community Church, and Bob was one of the ushers, and so I recognized him right away. And the big handshake and big smile and welcoming us into Raymond at the church. And I thought that was very fitting because one thing about these camps when we attended them, there was a really beautiful light touch of Christian philosophy and Christian standards. And Bob was great at I think helping children learn those standards in a light way that really had a great influence and was a great credit to Christianity. And Bob, such a wonderful ambassador for the philosophy and the stories of the Bible. And so I really appreciated that about Bob Metz. And I wanted to tell you that when we took over the camp in 2010, we had a lot of different programs we'd be running for with our sports backgrounds and our backgrounds in some of the arts, where we would have an a cappella camp and a track camp and a cross-country camp and several different camps. So we thought of the umbrella, like Dr. Johnson's camps, of having Slavinsky camps. But always in the plan, I want to assure you that someday, Jim Brennan and I will collaborate, and one of the Slavinsky camps, one of the weeks or the sessions, we'll get Camp Hawthorne back into the under the umbrella, and really moving to hear so much about the camp and Bob Metz's influence on the campers and the counselors, and I think we'll make him proud and bring Camp Hawthorne back in some form under the Slavinsky camp's operation.
Is there anyone else who would like to share anything or about another camper? Okay. Our concluding prayer. Almighty God, we have gathered in this place as one people because of our love and respect for Metzi. Let our first words be ones of thanksgiving and gratitude for the colors of joy and life he splashed upon us. Truly he lived with us and for us and left his distinctive mark upon all whom he touched. We are grateful for the times Metzi and fellow campers who have since passed were healthy, free to do the things they loved to do and walk in the ways they love to walk. Encourage us that we have been blessed by their spirits. And our closing benediction. Merciful God, support us all the day long until the shadows lengthen and the evening comes, and the busy world is hushed, and the fever of light is over, our work done. Then in your tender mercy, grant us also a safe lodging, a holy rest and place of peace at last. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. It has been a privilege being here. And Jim, you got your wish. I think I'm going to go back to the ministry. All right, thank you. Thank you, folks. All right, great.